The Galactic Council declares that humanity must prove its worth before being allowed to expand further. Dr. Eleanor Chen stood before the enormous curved table of the Galactic Council chambers, feeling impossibly small. The amphitheater rose around her in concentric rings, each populated by representatives of the 57 spacefaring civilizations that comprise the Galactic Cooperative. The lighting was subdued, casting the various alien dignitaries in shadow, their forms merely suggested rather than revealed. She had prepared for this moment for months, rehearsing her arguments, polishing her presentation, anticipating counterpoints. As Earth's chief diplomatic envoy, she represented not just a government but the entirety of human potential. "The Council will now hear the petition from Sol System," announced the Arbiter, a Vex ID whose translucent exoskeleton glowed with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with each word. "The humans request permission to establish colonies beyond their current restricted zone of 5 light-years from their home star." Eleanor straightened her posture and cleared her throat. The translation matrix embedded at the base of her skull would convert her speech to the standardized cooperative language for all present. "Honorable representatives of the Galactic Cooperative," she began, "humanity has now maintained peaceful occupation of our 5 systems for 73 standard years. We have followed all protocols, respected boundaries, and contributed technological innovations to the cooperative database as required. Our petition for expansion is both reasonable and necessary given our population growth." A ripple of movement passed through the chamber as various counselors shifted in their seats, appendages twitching or membranes fluttering, their species equivalent of murmuring. From the highest tier, a massive form leaned forward. Ambassador K.H. Vrain of the Tholian hegemony, a silicon-based entity whose volcanic homeworld had given rise to beings of living crystal. When he spoke, his voice resonated like stones grinding together. "The human petition is premature," K.H. Vrain stated. "Your species emerged from its cradle merely 3 centuries ago, still bearing the scars of your violent evolution. You have yet to prove you can be trusted with greater reach." Eleanor had expected this resistance. The Tholians had consistently opposed human expansion since first contact. "With respect, Ambassador," she countered, "many members of this council were granted expansion rights far earlier in their cosmic development. The Pendurian Collective was permitted 6 systems after only 2 centuries of spaceflight. The Pendurians had achieved internal harmony," interjected another counselor, this one a hovering cloud of luminous particles contained within a specialized environmental field. "Humans still wage economic warfare among themselves and maintain separate military forces, which we have never deployed beyond our system boundaries," Eleanor pointed out. "And our unification process continues to advance. The United Earth Directive now represents 93% of human settlements." The Arbiter raised 3 of its limbs, signaling for order. "The question before this body is not merely one of time elapsed, but of fundamental nature. Humanity's history suggests a troubling pattern that many council members find concerning." A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, cycling through images from human history, world wars, nuclear detonations, environmental catastrophes, and finally, the uncertain peace that had emerged in the late 21st century. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with both anger and embarrassment. This curated exhibition of human failures was designed to frame her species as fundamentally dangerous. "Every spacefaring race has overcome their violent beginnings," she argued. "The Vex ID themselves evolved from predatory hive organisms that consumed rival colonies. The Darmini were planetary conquerors for 10,000 years before achieving balance. History alone cannot be our judge." "It is not history alone that concerns us," said a new voice, softer but somehow more commanding than the others. Eleanor turned to face Counselor Tallis, the eldest representative of the Aeon Continuum, one of the founding species of the cooperative. The Aeons resembled tall, willowy humanoids with opalescent skin and eyes of liquid silver. Their civilization was ancient when most council species were still primitive. "Humanity moves too quickly," Tallis continued. "You adapt, evolve, and innovate at a rate that disturbs the careful balance we have maintained for millennia. In 73 years, you have already attempted to modify cooperative technologies in ways that violate our protocols. We call that improvement, Eleanor said, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. Innovation is our nature. Precisely our concern, Talus replied. Your nature. The arbiter's patterns shifted to a deep blue. The Council has reviewed your petition and supplementary materials. We find the request for unconditional expansion to be inadmissible at this time. Eleanor felt her heart sink. Months of preparation, and they had already decided. However, the arbiter continued, we are prepared to offer an alternative path. She raised her head, hope flickering. The Council proposes a worthiness trial. If humanity can demonstrate its value to the cooperative through an extraordinary contribution, we will reconsider your petition for controlled expansion. K.H. Frayn's crystalline form shimmered with what Eleanor recognized as agitation. Arbiter, the Tholian hegemony objects. The humans should be contained until they have evolved beyond their aggressive tendencies. Your objection is noted, Ambassador, but the founding charter allows for worthiness trials when a species shows promise despite concerns. Eleanor's mind raced. Worthiness trials were rare but not unprecedented. The Ravaki had earned their place by developing a cure for a plague threatening multiple council species. The Tausetians had created a revolutionary propulsion system. What would this trial entail? She asked carefully. The arbiter's appendages moved in a complex pattern. The Council has identified a crisis that requires immediate attention. The Nephilim sector has experienced catastrophic subspace ruptures that threaten several inhabited systems. Thus far, our conventional approaches have failed to stabilize the rifts. Images appeared in the chamber, showing vast tears in the fabric of space, energy cascading from wounds in reality itself. Humanity claims innovation as its strength, Talus said. Prove it. Develop a solution to seal these ruptures permanently. Succeed, and the Council will grant your expansion petition. Eleanor studied the data scrolling before her. The subspace ruptures were unlike anything in Earth's scientific records, but the basic principles seemed related to quantum field theory and transdimensional physics, areas where human scientists had made significant theoretical advances. How long do we have? She asked. The ruptures will reach critical expansion in approximately 1 standard year, the arbiter responded. After that, they will begin consuming inhabited worlds. A year to solve a problem that had stumped civilizations thousands of years more advanced than humanity. It seemed impossible, but impossibility had never stopped humans before. On behalf of Earth and humanity, I accept this worthiness trial, Eleanor declared. As she left the Council chambers, she felt the weight of 8 billion human lives on her shoulders. The stakes had just been raised from expansion rights to proving humanity's very worth to the galaxy. The Collaborative Sciences Complex in Geneva hummed with activity. 6 months had passed since the Council's challenge, and the world's greatest minds had been working around the clock. Eleanor strode through the central atrium, flanked by Dr. Hiroshi Nakamura, Earth's leading quantum physicist, and Dr. Fatima Al-Zahawi, whose work on transdimensional geometry had redefined human understanding of hyperspace. They're ready for us in the main lab, Hiroshi said, his voice tense with exhaustion and excitement. Kaode wants to show us the latest simulation results. Any progress? Eleanor asked as they stepped into a gravity lift. Fatima's expression was guarded. Yes and no. We understand the problem better, but the solution remains elusive. The lift deposited them on the 100th floor, where the Special Projects Division occupied an entire section of the complex. Security scans verified their identities before the doors parted. Dr. Kaode Olatunji was standing before a massive holographic display, his tall frame silhouetted against the swirling visualization of a subspace rupture. As director of the Worthiness Trial Project, he had coordinated the efforts of 2,000 scientists across Earth and its colonies. Ah, Eleanor, he called out, his deep voice carrying across the lab. Just in time. He gestured, and the simulation expanded, becoming more detailed. The rupture pulsed with exotic energies that defied normal spacetime constraints. The Council provided accurate data, Kaode said. These ruptures are quantum gravitational tears in the fabric of reality itself. Conventional containment fields only accelerate the deterioration. That's old news, Eleanor said. Please tell me we've made a breakthrough. Hiroshi stepped forward. Not precisely a breakthrough, but a new approach. We've been attempting to seal the ruptures from the outside, using variations of the Council's failed methods. But what if we're thinking about this wrong? He manipulated the holographic controls, and the simulation changed to show a different perspective, from inside the rupture looking out. The Council races view subspace as something to be controlled, regulated, contained, Hiroshi continued. But our quantum entanglement experiments suggest something different, that subspace isn't just another dimension but a living, reactive medium. Fatima joined him at the controls. We've been developing a theory that these ruptures are actually an immune response of sorts. Subspace is rejecting conventional containment the way a body rejects a foreign object. Eleanor frowned. You're suggesting subspace is alive? Not alive in a biological sense, Kaode clarified. But self-regulating in a way similar to a complex system. The Council's approach has been to force the ruptures closed through brute application of energy. And our approach? Eleanor asked. Dialogue, Fatima said simply. Eleanor stared at her. You want to talk to a tear in space? In a manner of speaking, Hiroshi said with a faint smile. We've developed a quantum resonance field that can match the frequency patterns of the rupture, essentially harmonizing with it rather than opposing it. Like singing the same note as a crystal glass to make it vibrate, Kaode added. We think we can guide the ruptures into self-healing by providing the correct resonance pattern. Eleanor circled the hologram slowly. How confident are you? The three scientists exchanged glances. Theoretically, it should work, Kaode said carefully. But the Council has provided limited access to actual rupture sites for testing. We've had to rely heavily on simulation. And these simulations? Eleanor pressed. 87% probability of success in our models, Fatima answered. But real-world application always introduces variables we can't predict. Eleanor considered this. The deadline is in 6 months. Do we have a practical implementation, or just a theory? Kaode nodded to a technician, who brought forward what looked like a small satellite, no larger than a dining table, with a complex array of emitters and sensors protruding from its central hub. This is the prototype resonance harmonizer, Kaode said. Small enough to deploy via standard shuttle, powerful enough to address a rupture of the size documented in the Nephili sector. Eleanor approached the device, studying it carefully. How many would we need? 1 for each rupture, Hiroshi replied. The current count is 17 major tears across the sector. And can we manufacture that many in time? With priority access to fabrication facilities, yes, Fatima said. The design is elegant in its simplicity, once we understood the theoretical framework. Eleanor took a deep breath. This was humanity's best hope, their chance to prove their worth to the Galactic Council. Begin production immediately, she ordered. And request permission from the Council for a limited field test at the smallest rupture site. As she left the lab, Eleanor couldn't help but wonder if they were making a terrible mistake. If their theory was wrong, the resonance approach might accelerate the ruptures rather than heal them. But humanity had always progressed through bold experimentation and calculated risk. The Council had challenged them to innovate. And innovation rarely came without risk. The Nephili sector existed at the outer boundaries of cooperative space, a region rich in rare elements but sparsely populated due to its distance from the major trade routes. The journey from Earth took 3 weeks via the fastest available transport. Eleanor stood on the observation deck of the cooperative science vessel Astral Inquiry, watching as the first human technical team prepared to deploy their resonance harmonizer. The Council had granted permission for a test at a minor rupture near an uninhabited system, a location chosen to minimize potential damage if the human approach failed. Ambassador Frey's crystalline form glittered beside her as they observed the preparations. The Tholian had insisted on overseeing the test personally, making no effort to hide his skepticism. "Your species continues to surprise me, Dr. Chen," he said, his translated voice rumbling through her earpiece. "Most would approach such a challenge with humility, perhaps adapting existing cooperative technologies. Instead, you propose an entirely new framework that contradicts 10,000 years of established science." Eleanor kept her expression neutral. "Different perspectives sometimes reveal solutions that established thinking cannot. Or lead to catastrophic failure," Frey countered. "The Council has permitted this test only because the alternative is to watch the ruptures expand unchecked." On the main view screen, the human shuttle approached the subspace rupture, a jagged tear in the fabric of space that shimmered with unnatural energies. The shuttle was tiny against the vastness of the phenomenon, which stretched over 50 kilometers. "Deployment team reports ready," announced the communications officer, one of the few humans permitted aboard the cooperative vessel. Eleanor nodded. "Proceed with deployment." The shuttle released the Harmonizer, which drifted toward the rupture under its own minimal propulsion. Once positioned at the calculated optimal distance, the device activated, extending its array of quantum resonators. "Resonance sequence initiating," reported Dr. Hiroshi from the control station. "The Harmonizer is analyzing the rupture's frequency patterns." On the view screen, the device began to pulse with soft blue light, its emissions invisible to the naked eye but represented through computer enhancement for the observers. "Phase 1 complete," Hiroshi continued. "Beginning harmonic resonance." The Harmonizer's pulses changed rhythm, becoming more complex, syncopated. The rupture seemed to ripple in response, its jagged edges fluctuating. "Is that expected?" Frey demanded, his crystalline structure vibrating with concern. "Yes," Eleanor assured him, though her own heart was racing. "The resonance creates a dialogue with the rupture's own energy pattern." Minutes passed in tense silence as the Harmonizer continued its work. The rupture's wild fluctuations gradually became more regular, more rhythmic, until they matched the device's pulsations exactly. "Harmonic synchronization achieved," Hiroshi announced, unable to keep the excitement from his voice. "Beginning Phase 3, guided closure." The Harmonizer's emissions changed again, subtly altering the shared frequency. The rupture followed, its energy pattern shifting in response. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the edges of the tear began to draw together. "It's working," Eleanor breathed. "Remarkable," murmured Frey, his skepticism giving way to begrudging interest. Over the next hour, the rupture continued to close, the process accelerating as the tear grew smaller. The Harmonizer adjusted its output continuously, guiding the process with delicate precision. Finally, with a flash of energy that momentarily blinded the sensors, the rupture sealed itself completely, leaving only a faint distortion in spacetime that quickly faded to nothing. "Rupture closure confirmed," Hiroshi reported, as cheers erupted from the human crew members. Subspace readings returning to normal parameters. Frey turned to Eleanor, his crystalline form now pulsing with a deeper hue that she had learned indicated profound thought among his species. "One success does not guarantee 17, he cautioned. "And the larger ruptures may present greater challenges." "Of course," Eleanor agreed. "But this proves our approach is viable. With the Council's permission, we'd like to proceed with full deployment." The Tholian ambassador seemed to consider this for a long moment before responding. "I will inform the Council of this development," he said finally. "They will want to analyze the data thoroughly before authorizing further action." Eleanor nodded, knowing this was as close to approval as she would get from the Tholian. As Frey departed the observation deck, she allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The test had worked perfectly. Humanity's approach, so different from the cooperative's conventional wisdom, had succeeded where advanced civilizations had failed. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Now they needed 16 more, the following weeks unfolded in a blur of activity. The Council, impressed by the initial test results, granted provisional approval for humanity to address the remaining ruptures. Production of harmonizers accelerated, and human scientific teams deployed across the Nephilim sector. Eleanor coordinated the effort from the Cooperative Command Center established in the sector's administrative hub. Reports flowed in continuously as harmonizers were deployed to ruptures of increasing size and complexity. The second and third deployments succeeded as smoothly as the first. The fourth encountered difficulties when the rupture's frequency pattern proved more erratic than anticipated, but the human team adapted the harmonizer's programming in real time, eventually achieving synchronization. By the fifth week, word of humanity's success had spread throughout the cooperative. Representatives from various council species arrived to observe the operations, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine interest. The Aeon Continuum is most impressed by your methodology, Counselor Tallis told Eleanor during a diplomatic reception. We have always approached subspace as a medium to be manipulated, never as a system to be understood. Sometimes being newcomers gives us an advantage, Eleanor replied. We don't have millennia of established practices to overcome. Tallis's silver eyes regarded her thoughtfully. Perhaps that is why the founders established the worthiness trial tradition. Fresh perspectives keep the cooperative from stagnation. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication. Eleanor excused herself and stepped aside to receive the message. Dr. Chen, we have a situation at Rupture Site 11, came Dr. Kaode's voice, tight with tension. The tier is behaving, unpredictably. Define unpredictably, Eleanor said, keeping her voice low. It's resisting synchronization, and we're detecting unusual energy signatures within the rupture itself. Almost as if. He hesitated. Almost as if something is coming through. Eleanor's blood ran cold. I'm on my way. Don't proceed until I arrive. She made her apologies to the assembled dignitaries and departed immediately for the command shuttle. Within an hour, she was approaching Rupture Site 11, where the largest of the tiers, nearly 200 kilometers across, pulsed with volatile energy. The human science vessel Prometheus maintained position at a safe distance, monitoring the deployment of the harmonizer, which floated near the rupture's edge, its resonance patterns visibly failing to match the tier's chaotic fluctuations. Eleanor boarded the Prometheus and made her way directly to the control room, where Kaode and his team worked frantically at their stations. Status report, she demanded. Kaode looked up, his face drawn with stress. The rupture is generating counterfrequencies that disrupt our resonance pattern. And these energy readings. He gestured to a display showing complex waveforms. They're organized, Eleanor. Structured. Meaning they're not random. They could be, well, the closest analogy would be communication. Eleanor stared at the display, then at the massive rupture on the view screen. You're suggesting something sentient is in subspace? Trying to communicate through the rupture? Or prevent us from closing it, Kaode said grimly. We've tried recalibrating the harmonizer 12 times. Each time, the rupture adapts to counter our approach. Eleanor considered their options. The deadline was approaching rapidly. They had successfully closed 10 ruptures, but this one of the largest, was proving resistant. And if Kaode was right about the structured energy patterns, what if we change our approach entirely, she suggested. Instead of trying to close this rupture, what if we stabilize it? Create a controlled, permanent aperture. Kaode looked startled. That's completely contrary to our mission parameters. The Council wants these ruptures closed. The Council wants the threat eliminated, Eleanor countered. If there's something in subspace trying to communicate, forcing this closed could be interpreted as hostile. Or something dangerous could be trying to break through, Kaode argued. Then we maintain control of the aperture, Eleanor said. We establish a stable, regulated connection that can be closed if necessary. Kaode rubbed his temples. Theoretically possible. We'd need to modify the harmonizer to establish a persistent resonance field rather than a closing sequence. How long? 12 hours for the programming changes. Another 6 to reconfigure the hardware. Eleanor nodded. Do it. And prepare a communication to the council explaining our decision. They won't like it, Kayode warned. Probably not, Eleanor agreed. But sometimes innovation means recognizing when your original approach is wrong. 18 hours later, the modified harmonizer deployed once more. Instead of attempting to close the rupture, it established a stable resonance field that contained and regulated the tear. The chaotic energy patterns calmed, stabilizing into a controlled aperture, and then, to everyone's astonishment, something emerged that it wasn't a physical entity but a complex pattern of energy that coalesced into a roughly spherical form outside the rupture. It pulsed with rhythmic variations that the ship's computers immediately recognized as a mathematical sequence, prime numbers, followed by basic geometric ratios. It's a first contact protocol, Hiroshi breathed. It's introducing itself through universal mathematical constants. The Cooperative Science Council, alarmed by humanity's deviation from the established mission, dispatched a delegation immediately. They arrived to find humans in cautious communication with an entity that called itself a Subspace Custodian, an ancient intelligence that existed within the subspace domain, monitoring and maintaining its integrity through mathematical exchange and gradually developing translation. The humans learned that the ruptures were indeed an immune response, not to outside interference as they had theorized, but to damaging fluctuations caused by certain cooperative propulsion technologies that had been slowly weakening the barriers between normal space and subspace for centuries. The Custodian had been trying to repair the damage, but lacked sufficient understanding of conventional space to communicate the problem. The human harmonizers had finally established a bridge that allowed dialogue. Within days, the diplomatic landscape transformed entirely. The Custodian provided specifications for modifications to cooperative propulsion systems that would prevent further damage to the subspace barrier. In exchange, it requested that a single, stable aperture be maintained to allow ongoing communication between the domains. The Council, initially furious at humanity's unauthorized deviation, found themselves facing an unprecedented diplomatic opportunity with an entirely new form of intelligence, one that had apparently existed alongside the cooperative for millennia without detection. 1 month later, Eleanor once again stood before the Galactic Council. The chamber felt different this time, less imposing, more familiar. The Council recognizes Dr. Eleanor Chen, representing humanity, the Arbiter announced, its bioluminescent patterns glowing with formal patterns. Honorable representatives, Eleanor began, I come before you to report the successful completion of our worthiness trial. 16 of the 17 subspace ruptures in the Nephilim sector have been permanently sealed using our resonance harmonizer technology. The 17th has been stabilized as a controlled aperture, allowing diplomatic exchange with the Subspace Custodians, a new intelligence this council has now formally recognized. She paused, looking around the chamber, noting how many counselors now leaned forward with interest rather than skepticism. In addition, the propulsion modifications suggested by the Custodians have been implemented across 20% of cooperative vessels thus far, with measurable reduction in subspace stress patterns. The remaining fleet is scheduled for upgrades within the standard year. Counselor Tallis rose from her seat. Humanity was tasked with solving a crisis that had confounded the cooperative's finest minds. Not only did you succeed, you established first contact with an entirely new civilization and initiated diplomatic relations that may benefit us for centuries to come. Eleanor inclined her head in acknowledgement. We approached the problem with fresh perspective, as newcomers often can. Ambassador K.H. Vrain's crystalline form shifted, catching the light. The Tholian hegemony acknowledges that humanity has demonstrated considerable resourcefulness. Your willingness to abandon established protocols when they proved ineffective shows an adaptability that has value. Coming from K.H. Vrain, this was extraordinary praise. The Arbiter's patterns shifted to a formal configuration. This council has deliberated on humanity's performance in their worthiness trial. Our conclusion is unanimous. Eleanor held her breath. Humanity has not merely passed their trial but exceeded all reasonable expectations. Therefore, in accordance with cooperative law and tradition, humanity is granted expansion rights to an additional 12 systems beyond their current 5 light-year boundary. A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Furthermore, the arbiter continued, humanity is invited to establish a permanent seat on the Cooperative Science Council in recognition of their unique approach to subspace physics. Eleanor bowed deeply. On behalf of humanity, I accept these honors with gratitude and humility. As the formal session concluded, Eleanor found herself approached by Counselor Tallis. You have surprised us all, Dr. Chen, the ancient Aeon said quietly. Many on the council expected humanity to fail, or worse, to attempt a military solution to the ruptures. We understood what was really being tested, Eleanor replied. Not just our scientific capabilities, but our character. Tallis's silver eyes studied her. Indeed. And what does humanity plan to do with its newly granted expansion rights? Eleanor smiled. Something unexpected, I imagine. It's our nature. The Aeon's expression remained serene, but Eleanor thought she detected a hint of amusement. Then perhaps the cooperative will need to grow accustomed to unexpected developments. The universe has a way of surprising even those who have observed it for millennia. As Eleanor departed the council chambers, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Humanity had proven its worth not through dominance or force, but through innovation, adaptability, and the courage to challenge established thinking. The stars beyond their current boundaries would soon feel the touch of human exploration, human curiosity, human determination. And the galaxy would never be quite the same. As the diplomatic shuttle carried her back toward Earth, Eleanor gazed out at the star-strewn blackness. Somewhere out there, 12 new systems waited for humanity's arrival. 12 new worlds to explore, to understand, perhaps to call home, and beyond them, a vast galaxy still largely unknown. She thought of how close they had come to failure, how their initial approach to the ruptures had been theoretically sound but fundamentally limited. It was only by questioning their own assumptions, by being willing to see the problem from an entirely different perspective, that they had succeeded. Perhaps that was humanity's greatest strength, not merely intelligence or determination, but the capacity to reimagine possibilities, to see beyond established boundaries of thought. The cooperative had existed for thousands of years, maintaining a careful balance among its member species, advancing along predictable technological paths. They had created a stable, peaceful civilization spanning a significant portion of the galaxy, but stability, without the stimulus of new ideas and perspectives, could eventually lead to stagnation. Perhaps that was why the worthiness trials existed, not merely to test newcomers, but to revitalize the cooperative itself with fresh approaches. Humanity was young, impetuous, and still struggling with its own internal conflicts. But those very challenges had forged a species that questioned everything, that refused to accept limitations, that constantly sought new solutions to old problems. The subspace ruptures had been seen by the Council as a crisis to be contained. Humans had seen them as a doorway to be opened. As Earth grew from a small blue dot to a vibrant sphere on her viewscreen, Eleanor smiled to herself. Humanity had passed its first great galactic test, but she suspected it would not be the last. The universe was vast, complex, and full of challenges that would require more than advanced technology to solve. They would require vision, courage, and the willingness to see beyond the familiar, qualities that humans, for all their flaws and limitations, possessed in abundance. As the shuttle began its descent through Earth's atmosphere, Eleanor composed a message she would deliver to the United Earth Directive. Humanity has proven its worth. Now we must prove its wisdom. The real journey was just beginning.